All right. Good afternoon, members of the media. Thank you very much for joining us today, once again for our weekly press conference. We've had a lot of things happening this week, and we're happy to have executive members of the Alliance for Change here with you today to answer your questions and, of course, to make some presentations and some statements. I wanted to start probably with myself because I'm going to do a statement on Parliament, and then we'll have presentations from Kemraj Ramjatan, Jaritha Finance, and Devon Sayers, our Member of Parliament from Region 10. We also have in our virtual studio, Dr. Vince Adams, who is available, and also Member of Parliament David Patterson, who is also available to answer any additional questions that you may have. So my statement is on Parliament. The Alliance for Change notes that nearly a month after the National Assembly would have resumed after recess, finally a sitting of the Assembly has been called for Monday, November 7th. The AFC, however, reiterates its ongoing concern regarding the operations, independence, and spirit of the 12th Parliament of Guyana. These concerns have been raised before, but it is vitally necessary to put it back on the table and to put on the table the issues that hinder the work of the Parliament, in the hope that a greater commitment might be made by all to ensuring its efficiency and effectiveness in managing the affairs of Guyana. Despite the rancor that permeates the discussions of the House, there continues to be some unresolved deficiencies, and we lament that their mere existence suggests that the Speaker is unwilling to tackle these defects. We recognize that the functioning of parliamentary committees is the foundation of facilitating scrutiny in all areas of government policy and administration. It is through these committees that we guarantee the opportunity for all sides of the House to participate, discuss issues of national importance, facilitate robust discussion, and most importantly, strive to achieve consensus on national issues in the best interest of the country. Given this laudable expectation, we find it reprehensible and unacceptable that several parliamentary sectorial committees are almost comatose, or in some cases have never seen the light of day more than 2 years since Parliament first started. At the most critical time in this nation's history, at a time when we face a rapidly developing oil and gas sector, one in which is currently plagued by a lack of transparency in the publishing of government contracts and feasibility studies if they exist. The National Resource Committee has never met. With our border dispute in the International Court of Justice, the Foreign Relations Committee has never met. With rapidly increasing crime, a possible result of the high cost of living, the Security Sector Committee has never met. And the Economic Services Committee has been waiting since March to resume under a new chair after rotation. This 12th Parliament, for the first time in Guyana's history, has the unenviable reputation of being the place where motions of high priority, like the ones on the high cost of living, the massive flooding, and the resulting loss of income and damage to property of ordinary Guyanese, are struck out and not allowed to be discussed by the very persons elected to represent the people of Guyana. Questions to the House continue to be butchered, not edited, and often lack of a timely response is given. All of this in addition to the infrequent sittings, which indirectly silence debate on important issues. For example, Private Members' Day, which occurs every 6th sitting when opposition issues are examined, can now take months to come around. The subjective manner in which issues are dealt with continue to suggest bias. Most recently, I got a response from Parliament to my inquiry regarding my motion submitted in February regarding Minister Dharam Lal and taking him to the Privileges Committee. It is clear in the response afforded to me that the offended individual was accorded the opportunity to withdraw his famous dildo comment. But Mr. Duncan was suspended for his response to Mr. Dharamlal's vulgarity. It begs the question, was Mr. Duncan offered the opportunity to withdraw his statement also? Let the record show that to date, Mr. Dharamlal has not even had the decency to apologize, at least to the women members of the House. As we in the Alliance for Change continue to hope that these issues will be rectified, I personally can't help but feel, is this democracy? Thank you very much. And we would like to go immediately to Jaretha Finance, and she has a statement on the economy. Jaretha? I know I saw Jaretha earlier. Let me double check. If she's not here.
Technical.
Okay, Jaretha, you want me to?
Apologies there. Thank you so much.
Okay.
My report is going to be particularly as it regards to the World Bank fact sheet and the way in which that has been reported. The first thing I want to say is that the fact sheet on Guyana, as presented by the World Bank in the most recent update on October 3rd, 2022, spoke to the hardship being faced by Guyanese in an oil-producing economy. The situation as portrayed by the data presented in the fact sheet of the World Bank report is what is lived by Guyanese daily: poverty, income loss, and high infant mortality rate. The report also highlighted significant risks that the country faces, with emphasis being placed on management of oil resources, the quality of spending, and the Dutch disease. The World Bank fact sheets speaks to the most recent data on poverty, stating that 48% of Guyanese are living on less than $1,000 per day. This data sadly does not take into consideration the inflation rate as experienced in Guyana from 2020 to now, particularly the inflation rate for basic food items. The report also stated, and I quote, in 2021, 71.6% of Guyanese households had experienced income loss compared to January of 2020 levels, with the most severe impact typically found in low-income households, end of quote. Income loss is not a figment of our imagination. As the Bureau of Statistics' latest report said, that youth unemployment is at 31.9%, and the Bank of Guyana's half-year report stated that public sector employment fell by 10.9% at the end of June 2022. This was particularly due to lower employment within central government, which fell by 17.7%. These are real issues being faced by Guyanese, and there is no efforts being made by the PPP administration to even attempt to remedy or provide aid to the most vulnerable people in society. And when information from the Bureau of Statistics and the Bank of Guyana is examined, it is clear that more Guyanese are currently living in poverty today with oil resources than were living in poverty in 2019 without oil resources. The fact sheet also substantiated the fact by pointing out the negative impacts on the pandemic to the period before the pandemic. The Alliance for Change has been calling on the PPP administration to put measures in place to tackle the issue of household income prior to this updated report. And we urge the PPP administration to act now to arrest these issues. We call on the PPP to give the elderly persons living in society a pension that they can live on, and we reinforce our call for public servants to be given a decent salary increase of at least 50%. These calls are justifiable, particularly when the World Bank is reporting that, and I quote, oil production and consequently real GDP is expected to jump in 2022, with real GDP expected to be more than double by 2023, pushing per capita income to over 20,000 US dollars and the current nominal exchange rate. The resources are available, and it cannot be business as usual for the PPP when the people cannot afford a decent meal and when people are living in poverty. Today, we are calling on the PPP administration to stop their actions of bulldozing people's homes to the ground, to stop their actions of not giving policy measure that is actually addressing and dealing with the most vulnerable persons living in society. We believe that the World Bank report should be used as a call to action by the PPP administration, as it is clearly stated in the report. Increasing oil and gas revenues will allow financing of significant budget outlays to address development needs and tackle poverty. This should be used as a call to action. Let the resources of the country finally be directed to tackle poverty. I thank you.
Thank you, Jurita. And now I'd like to go to Member of Parliament from Region 10, MP Devon Sears.
Thank you very much, Kathy. And so the members of the media and the viewing audience, thank you so much for your attendance and of course tuning in. I'll try to be brief as possible, and I want to highlight a few areas of contention within Upper Demerara Berbice. Let's start with the budgetary allocation. Of course, in 2022, $5.3 billion was budgeted for Upper Demerara Berbice. However, being that we are in November 2022, it's sad to say that up to now, the region has only expended 51%, well, to date, 51% of the capital budget, right? With regards to the failure of contracts, we are experiencing a lot of this, particularly, of course, the AFC in a few press conferences ago, and even the Regional Democratic Council had flagged what is happening at Bamia Primary School. And of course, we've been very vocal to say that the contractors are not competent and they would not be able to execute that particular project in time. And that this is one of the setbacks in capital. So at this stage, the Bamia Primary School is at it most recently restarted, but it's still at phase 1. So the Regional Democratic Council would have written to through the instruction written to the Ministry of Finance asking for a change in work program, because it fears that we're going to the end of the budgetary year, the money likely will be sent back. So we're trying to avoid that, and of course try to see how best we can get the Bamia Primary School completed. But we're still, again, as the Regional Democratic Council and as the MP responsible for this region, saying that the contractors are not competent. And we're seeing this all across the region in quite a few projects because they're not being executed on time. There's a holdup in spending of these monies. So at this stage, we are at 51%. Another area of contention is when it comes to education. Heading into this new school term, we had flagged that a lot of the schools are not fully prepared to open fully to the students, particularly because of infrastructural work that needed to be done, washroom facility not being up to standard, and several other issues in regards to bees and different issues. So at this stage, the AFC again is calling on the Ministry of Education to carry out a thorough investigation, even though we're coming to the end of the school term. But we're thinking ahead that for the new school year, every single issue that has been raised to ensure the safety of our students be addressed with urgency. In the Rivering area, what we have recognized also is that a lot of teachers which were assigned or reallocated to those areas to work in those areas are not teaching. However, they're enjoying the benefits that goes with rural placements. And this is something that we are encouraging the Ministry of Education to look into, because you're depriving the student of a proper education. And one of those areas A few of those areas are Kalkuni and Wairudi that needs to be looked into. In terms of health, most recently, the Minister of Health donated an ambulance to Aituni, but I must say that it was not a part of the 2022 budget. It was a part of the 2021 budget. And what is not surprising, again, politics being played out. Our representatives here from Region 10, the councillors who lobbied and made representation for that ambulance, none of them were invited to be a part of that handing over ceremony. But while we welcome the donation to iTunes, because we believe that every community should have proper health facility and resources, we believe that there must always be inclusion and proper representation being given when these equipment are being handed over. In terms of unemployment within the region, it's at its highest. Despite what the government might say that there's not an unemployment issue, there is one in Region 10. Many of our youngsters who just graduated from CXE or GTI or CAPE, or even the University of Guyana, is finding it very difficult to gain employment here within the region. And the government had promised over 1,000 jobs at these flowery speeches, but unfortunately, we are not enjoying the benefits of employment here within the region. Most recently, they had relaunched applications for the call center, but again, persons are not applying, particularly because the conditions there are not up to par, especially when it comes to payment. And this is of great concern. And I'll even go further. At the Linden Hospital complex, we have 30 doctors who have asked to be reassigned out of the region, and we have over 50 nurses which have resigned or asked for reassignments in other regions. So this is an indication that even our health workers are not comfortable under the conditions that the administration has them under. So, and then I'll even go forward with this particular issue. At the Charles Rosa School of Nursing, they literally have closed off the program. So how it is, if nurses and doctors are leaving, we need to get more folks coming in and more professionals being trained to address the health crisis that we have within the region. And we, as the Alliance for Change, is going to keep pressing on and keep pushing to ensure that this issue is addressed. And one of the things we've recognized too, most recently, with the firing of former CEO Rudy Small, the regional health officer is acting as the CEO of the hospital complex. So you have the regional health officer who has his mandate acting as the CEO of the Linden Hospital complex. We have been calling, as the Alliance for Change, to have a board, a proper board, a fully represented board in place at the Linden Hospital complex so that its mandate can be properly executed. But to date, this has been totally ignored, but we will continue to press on it. And I really hope that the members of the media take stock of this and push our message for us. In terms of cost of living, I echo the sentiments of Comrade Joretta Fernandez, which stated that we are pushing for a 50% salary increase across the board for all public servants, because we believe our public servants have been working very, very hard. And not only that, the cost of living needs to be cushioned. And that current minimum wage, or $90-something thousand, cannot cover rent, water, electricity, maybe pay for daycare and the works, and still live a comfortable life within Guyana. So we're pushing and we're asking that the government and the authorities consider having a 50% increase across the board, so as to cushion the current cost of living that we are faced with across the country. In Linden here, we see pumpkin being sold for almost $700 and other greens going up. Chicken is on the rise. One egg is $80. And pretty soon, heading into the Christmas season, it might be $120 for one. So we are in a crisis situation right now. What is holding Linden together is remittance. The long lines at the MoneyGram or Western Union, that can be seen every single day. But persons actually making money to go and bank and save so that they can invest in their future, we're not seeing any of that. So we are in a crisis situation. In terms of the municipality, right now the municipality is unable to function properly because it has a big debt, over $200 million that it has to pay to GRA, NIS, LUSCSL, and the works. And we have been lobbying and asking the government to bail the municipality out so that it can provide proper services to the residents of Linden and Region 10. Not only that, expand the boundaries of Linden so that more taxes can be collected, and again, better service can be given to the residents of Region 10. In closing, I want to say to our viewing audience and Guyanese and even you, the media, that we must start thinking for ourselves. Not everything that is glittering is actually gold. There's only a particular set of people within this country that is benefiting. And unless the resources that we have is equally distributed, we will always have a contention and of course, a greater gap between the rich and the poor. And we're hoping that with the newfound oil wealth, that this wealth can be evenly distributed so that all of us can grow while the country develops as Guyanese. Thank you very much, Captain.
Thank you very much, Member Parliament Devin Sears from Region 10. And our closing statement, Mr. Kamraj Ramjatan, leader of the Alliance for Change.
Thank you very much, Kathy. And that was an exceptionally good, comprehensive report from my colleague, Devin Sears. The AFC is doing a press release here on the security sector. The AFC notes that the headlines in popular newspapers and in the social media have messaged clearly an increasing level of crime in Guyana. Even the advisories from foreign governments continue to paint a picture that Guyana's crime situation is dismal. The PPP's government response is to hoard the information and employ a strategy of non-disclosure. This noticeable halt of the sharing of the weekly statistics to the press from the Ministry of Home Affairs or the Public Relations Department of the Police Force will only make suspect the claim that there is decreasing crime in Guyana. This also further leads to our community feeling insecure and unsafe. Just like how it feels that publishing information regarding the health of Guyana's financial sector, especially the non-oil sector, the PPP government unwisely thinks that hiding the crime statistics will lead to a less adverse security mindset. The AFC demands that the government makes the crime statistics, that is the weekly crime statistics, be made public as given to it by the police force. Additionally, the policy of focused deterrence, where efforts directed to those neighborhoods or hotspots where crime is rampant, must be improved upon by more patrols and cameras. The AFC also calls for the convening of the Parliamentary Oversight Committee on the security sector as provided for by Article 119D of the Constitution and Standing Order 87 of the Standing Orders of the National Assembly. After the members of this committee were named early in this 12th Parliament, the Minister of Home Affairs, as its chairman, has not seen it fit to operationalize this important committee, which has responsibility for examining the policies and administration of the entities in the security sector. The coalition government during the 11th Parliament made this committee functional and brought then Commissioner of Police Silal Prasad and the heads of the prison and fire services to detail their plans and programs for their respective sectors. They were extensively questioned and scrutinized by members of the opposition then, which included Clement Rohi, Gil Teixeira, and Harry Gill. They even demanded visits to police stations in the coast and interior regions, after which extensive reports about conditions therein were completed by that committee. The committee's usefulness is to bring to the attention of opposition members the status quo of the security sector in both policy and administration matters. To date, its dysfunction means that our security sector is worse off for this absence of scrutiny. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kemraj Ramjatan, Member of Parliament and leader of the Alliance for Change. I open the conference now to any questions. As is normal procedure, we would ask that you identify yourself and also the news entity or media that you represent. As much as possible, if you could use the raise hand feature, that will assist. Okay, so any questions?
Davina.
Davina's, okay, Davina, thank you. Please go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. Ms. Hughes, during your statement, you spoke about Parliament's response to a motion you had submitted. Can you say when you received your response, and is it possible for you to share Parliament's response with the press?
Absolutely. I received it 2 days ago, and I can send it, I will scan it and send it out with our press statement just after this meeting. Would that
Okay,
be
thank
okay?
you.
Yep.
I have some questions off of the statements that were made. Can I go ahead, or do you want to take questions from?
No, go ahead. Your hand
Okay.
was up. Go ahead.
All right. So my first question, government has announced the terms of new PSAs for the oil blocks to be auctioned at year end. Part of the changes include an increased royalty rate of 10%. However, this would only be for new blocks, which range between 1,000 to 3,000 square kilometers, whereas the Stabroek block equals 26,800 square kilometers. My question to the AFC is, what are your thoughts on government chasing more from these small acreage when the sweetheart deal remains untouched for oil giant ExxonMobil? There's another part as well. I wanted to know if the party thinks investors would see this as a disadvantage, since Exxon, that of course holds the largest block, would only pay 2% royalty, no taxes, and has no ring fencing provision, whereas they will be required to give us more, basically.
Vince Adams.
Excellent question, and I'd like to ask Dr. Vince Adams to take that question.
Hey, thanks, Kathy. Thanks, Davina. You must be reading my mind here, Davina, because I saw that yesterday, and you've got to be blind not to see that there are three objectives. In that, what I call to me it's a political shenanigan. First, it's a blatant attempt to distract from the renegotiations pressure, the pressure that they've been beaten over the head with. So it's a distraction from that to take the conversation away into these new numbers from wherever they came from. The second, you can see the second objective, which is also political, is to protect Exxon's entrenched position. There's no question that this here is to protect Exxon, and of course, it is to protect the interests of friends and families who are already entrenched in these big contracts that have been given away. Now, the first question not the first, so that's the major issue. Those are the questions that there's no question there, because it's clear as to what the objectives are. So, but let's get down to, again, I think you're very sharp in identifying that this here is no question a disadvantage and unfair treatment of new investors. How could you protect Exxon, the big behemoth Exxon, and then you're going to these new investors, which may include, by the way, potential Guyanese investors. The other part of that is, there's no question that probably the hog of all of these, of all of the reserves that is in that basin have already been on contract by Exxon and whoever else have contracts. So here you are now is the left, that these smaller contracts, including Guyanese, I want to emphasize that, who would be getting an opportunity to bid, they're going to be shut out. They're basically being priced out of the market with this gimmick that, well, oh, we're giving this big thought. And you know what's amusing? I mean, I just had to laugh, was the vice president throwing big names around. Some, I can't remember the name of the company. What did he call him? A global powerhouse. Of course, you know that's his nature to embellish stuff when it's in his favor. But nobody cares about throwing around names, global powerhouse, and that. They wear their shorts and pants like everybody else. So that doesn't intimidate anybody. So you should stop doing that and level with us. As a technical person, the first question I would ask, what is the basis of these numbers that they're throwing around? I don't care whether they're global powerhouse. What is the basis? Whose model are they using? There are tons of models out there. I've always been advocating to getting rid of the PSA, period. Why not get rid of the PSA, which would be better for us to manage? They talk about reducing the cost oil from 75 to 65%. That doesn't matter. I could increase. I've got a model where you increase, go ahead and increase rather than reducing it, increase cost oil to 100% and take all of your money out to royalty. Then you don't have to be auditing books and all of that stuff. So this here is really, all of this gimmick is just to get away from the fundamental business and moral principles that is expected of every democratic society and country, which is to have open, free, and fair competition. That is now being shut out in order to protect Exxon. And they want to change the conversation from renegotiation, the new renegotiation pressure that they're getting, over for us to be talking about it, which is exactly the rabbit hole that we're going down right there. And I hope that the media does not fall for this trap. If you're going to renegotiate, whatever you come up with, as a matter of fact, I'm advocating for put some technical team. We're not a technical team, but we ought to put politics aside. Let both the opposition and the party in power come together, put together a team of knowledgeable experts to come up with what's best for the country of Guyana and spread it across, not for what's the past contract and the future contracts. Let's do that and decide what's best for Guyana. I don't care whether it's the old contracts or the new contracts. That would be fair. That would be setting the level playing field, and that's where we ought to be going. So don't come up with this gimmick about these numbers don't mean a thing to anybody. It has to be fair, free, and open competition, and we don't have that. If you want to go there, it has to be for everybody.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vince. Yes, David Patterson, I was actually going to invite you to say a few words.
Yes, I thank you very much, Vince. Davina, is a very good question. I think I anticipated that as well, and I endorse all that Vince has said. First and foremost, we should acknowledge, and I highlight that this process was started. The process of auctioning off blocks was commenced under the coalition, I think, under the Ministry of National Resources, headed by my colleague, former Minister Raphael Trotman. So we're not surprised. Well, we're pleased that they've actually taken at least one of our suggestions on board. But always, as Vince is saying, the devil is in the details. And the details show you that there's no ring fencing. I heard a fair response by the Vice President saying that the blocks are so small, you don't need to have the ring fencing provision in there. That's ludicrous. 1,000 square kilometers or 1,000 square miles is a vast area to cover. Normally, one of these oil finds don't be larger than 600 meters in diameter. So there you can imagine how many oil finds you can have in 1,000 or 3,000 square kilometers. So The idea of ring fencing should always be up foremost in our mind. To date, Davina Exxon has 33. They've announced 33 oil discoveries of significant oil, and they've been given approval for 4, I think. It is Lisa 1, Lisa 2, Payara, and now Yellowtail, which means that they have 29 more oil discoveries which they can exploit. I don't see it's unreasonable if the government says to Exxon, we will grandfather you in for these 4, or maybe the next one, and the 4 or the 5 discoveries that you have. We'll grandfather you in the sense that you do not have to. The old deal can work for the 4 as a matter of compromise. However, for the other 29 discoveries, you shall be subject to the new regime, and everyone in the oil industry will be on a level playing field. You can argue the grandfathering in for Exxon for the first 4 is in recognition for their pioneering work that they would have done in first discovering oil on the block. But to totally exclude them, to totally not mention anything about renegotiation, as Vince is saying, that is a complete smoke screen. They have the largest block, as you said, 26,000 square kilometers, which would be literally at least 13 or 14 times greater than their competitor, and which means that the probability of more oil finds in that 26,000 square kilometers is exponentially higher. So to give them a free pass for that entire block is, according to the lines of change, is unacceptable. Another point which the vice president skillfully avoided is a matter of farming out. Kaichur News and the rest of the country is well aware what had transpired with the giveaway of the blocks prior to 2015. The question of the Kanji block still unresolved, the answers behind it. But as it's public knowledge, it was a company set up, and they just simply were given these and delivered these blocks, close friends and family, to the PPP. And then they immediately flipped them, farmed them out, as the technical word is. There is no provisions, no statements there by the vice president on how we're going to avoid that. So obviously what can be done is friends and family, as Vince and everyone is saying, can acquire a block, and the very next day, you can farm it out. So therefore, what we're calling for is very transparency and accountability in the allocation of these blocks. And then and finally, we also must tie this into a better solvent wealth fund for distribution, equitable distribution of the resources for all Guyanese, in particular of future generations. Right now, we have over $1 billion is reported to be put in the Natural Resource Fund for 2022 alone. Up to 2021, they had over 700 million. Yet, Guyanese are suffering, as Dorita and Devin has said. There's no credible plan for distributing equitable distribution and ease of the cost of living. So therefore, with all of these new announcements, what the PPP are doing is trying to deflect from the mishandling of the sector, deflect from their non-distribution, non-equitable distribution of the oil wells to the people of Guyana. So while we do welcome a move, and the move was there, as Vince said, is triggered by the pressure to renegotiate, as well as to deflect. We do think that much more can be done for the oil sector. And we have, and I reiterate the AFC's position, we are willing to lend our assistance, our expertise, and our support in getting an equitable deal for all Guyanese. Thank you.
let me, if you will, Kathy, let me add a little bit here. With reference, Davina, to as part of this new proposal here, or it might be a decision, I'm not sure. When it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. I mean, it's not a good technical approach to evaluate the value of a block based on a size. That's not how geology works. It's not the size of the blocks that you ought to be saying, well, okay, the size of this, so I'm going to put a different term. It's the value. You know, what is the reserve in that block? I may have a very small block and have more value than you, that you have a size of, or your block may be 10 times mine, and it doesn't have any oil in it. So it's not the size of the block. It's the value. And here's the nuance of this, is that I'll be willing to guarantee you that Exxon, because they've got all the technology, Exxon knows exactly what's in all of these blocks based on all of the drilling data that have been, that is out there, that they've done, and the seismic studies. I even read a little bit where it says that even those blocks those pieces that are going to be relinquished, let's say from the Starbuck block, are going to be up as part of the deal. Well, does anyone really do believe that Exxon is going to relinquish anything that has any proper value? So Exxon is going to relinquish, some areas, and then, some new investor are going to invest in that. Now, you think that Exxon is really going to relinquish anything as of value? Or, so that is the point, that it's not about the size of the block, it's about the value of the block. And that is why everybody ought to be treated fairly and consistently.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vince Adams, and thank you to David Patterson. Davina, I think you said that you might have had a follow-up question. Is that correct? Or are there any other questions from anyone?
Yes, I do have a follow-up that I'm looking for from Mr. Ramjitan, and if Mr. Patterson would like to offer his comment as well. Specifically, I wanted to know what the politicians think about the 10% royalty, the royalty rate.
Well, being directed to me, again, we are saying that this is a kind of a subjective element that is brought into, just like how they had initially indicated 1%. There is a subjectivity element, because remember, we argued strongly to raise that to 2%, and we managed, although there was a model agreement that only said 1%, we managed 2%. Now they have come up with something here, excluding Exxon, with 10%, which is so arbitrary. Davina, I want you to understand that it could also mean a disincentivizing of other concessionaires when you put that there, in this sense, that if they don't find the oil as large, in a large amount like Exxon, as Vince has mentioned, these people, having found the oil, but now got to pay 10% royalty, might very well not invest in it, and thereby, what you call, not allow Guyanese and its future generations to get the amount of money. Rather, they would let the oil stay there forever. We have a very, as we had argued, we indicated that we must not doom our developmental future, our developmental prospects by being too, what you call, expansive on all of these things, as you know, there's some critics that criticize us on. But to do an auction, which should be the best advice. So at 10%, yes, if everybody paid at 10%, including Exxon, that will be excellent. But you might have people who find oil that is profitable and commercial, but find now that the 10% and even the 10% corporate tax so harsh on them that they rather leave it there to the extent then that we do not benefit whatever we should have benefited for, let's say, had we gone for 9% royalty or 8% royalty. And that is why I'm saying that there is a pragmatism that is required in commercial arrangements. And that's my point to it. But okay, they did change the thing and they bring it from 1%, the first 2012 model, to 10%, but it still doesn't make sense. And there is a potential for a disincentivization into the oil sector by small players.
Thank you, Kamraj. David?
Yes, right. Davina, for us, it is a step in the right direction. It is a thing. But as I said before, the devil is in the details. You have to look at everything holistically. Somebody may shout 10% is a good number, but then when you actually do award your PSA, there is no clause in there for unlimited liability insurance. There's no clause for studies. There's no clause for wastewater management and those things like that. So therefore, while you may just look at the number 10% and someone and shout you they've done a good job, if you don't look at the holistic, the entire package, then is when you could know. Because of course, give this 10%. If you insist on limited liability coverage, if you insist on no dumping, if you insist on no flaring and do away with that absurd clause that Exxon has in their permit, which allows them to flare and you would just fine them $35 and those things like that. If they're going to flare, we're going to fine them $3 million per ton or something like that. So therefore, when everything is in other words, when the entire package is looked at, then is when we can say it or we give you a passing grade or not. But just throwing a simple number out, you could be charging them 10% and you'd be giving away 50, 60, 70% with loose regulations and policies. So don't let us be caught up with the number, just the overall percentage, 10%. It's the whole package, it's the whole view of it, the local content value, etc. Because that is all has to. Are they going to revise the schedule 1 in the local content act? So therefore, to ensure that more money stay locally, is there any clause to ensure that Guyanese benefit other than the action? In technology transfers and those things like that. So we have to look at it in the whole package. And if all other conditions, I'm talking about flaring, no dumping, unlimited coverage, etc. And if all others, no ring fencing, if all of those are satisfied, then we could look and say, oh yes, we give this 10% to passing grade. But right now, it's just a number plucked out to the air, with no analysis presented to the public, and it's just a number. So persons are now saying, oh, 10% is better than 2%, but the devil remains in the detail.
Thank you, David Patterson. Let me ask the media, are there any other questions? I know we've been here for just about an hour. We're happy to answer your questions, but I don't see any other hands going up. Davina? Okay, Davina, go right ahead.
Thank you very much. Just this week, Exxon announced that it awarded a contract to a Japanese shipbuilder to construct Guyana's 5th FPSO. However, the requisite environmental approvals, along with the field development plan, which actually guides the construction of this vessel, is yet to be approved. What is the AFC's position on this?
Look, everyone in this country knows that what we are going through is a pantomime. Exxon knows it, and they're just exposing the government because the EPA has been, what should I say? They're diminished. They don't do anything. Exxon already knows that they will be granted a permission, and they are so contemptuous of the people of Guyana that they proceed without even the attempt to say that they are adhering to our laws and regulations. And this is not an isolated incident, you know what I mean? You know, they awarded SBM the contract for Priora earlier, and they said that was just, and they use the excuse saying that the SPSO that's being built now, they use that excuse saying they're trying to get economies of scale and better prices and those things like that. But in any other country, but obviously, I mean, but they know that everyone knows that EPA will grant them the approval. Everyone knows that. It's a pantomime. EPA will just simply photocopy the last environmental permit, delete the last name. I think the last name was Yellowtail, and they'll just insert a new name. Exact same, no difference, no comments from the public will be taken into account, no comments from our international colleagues who've expressed serious concerns about how we are operating and the dangers which we are operating. It's just a simple continued contempt for the people of Guyana. And it will not change unless the government develops, and which is very unlikely, the political will to say that we have a process here, we have a country that we have laws and you should obey them. You can't do certain things before. But once again, also, we may not know that how they may have spoken to the Minister of Natural Resources and the Vice President, and he may have verbally given them approval or tacitly given them approval to proceed. So while it, on the face of it, flies as ignoring the laws and the procedures of the country, who knows what backroom deals has already been cut on this project.
Thank you, David. I think Derwin Willis has his hands up.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Hughes. Good afternoon, everyone. Derwin Wills from the Guyana Chronicle. Firstly, on the question of the PSA, I recall in 2020, a statement was released when the APNO FC was still in government, which sort of said that the government at the time believed in the sanctity of the contract regarding the 2016 PSA. But I'm wondering what has changed since then to even think that there's a potential for sort of reviewing those terms. I think someone specifically went back to that 2016 PSA.
Well,
go ahead. Yeah.
Mr. Wills, I want you to recall the very first budget speech and the very first speech that we made in the Parliament, and that we said the coalition and the AFC said that we will be willing to work with the government or any other stakeholder to ensure that that we get an equitable deal for the best of the country. We also said that when the PSA was signed in June of 2016, and I want you to be very specific, and you go on there. When the PSA was signed in June of 2016, Exxon at that time had only announced 400 million barrels of oil. We only had one oil discovery, PSA, Lisa 1. Secondly, just a few days, like 3 or 4 weeks before the signing of that contract, the parliament, not Maduro, the parliament of Venezuela had issued a parliamentary decree saying that the entire coastal area, economic coastal area of Guyana was under their, was Venezuelan. So that was the backdrop in 2016. And we have always said it how the circumstances have changed. We said it how that and we signed the 2016 deal under that backdrop, and we said that we thought at the time, and we still feel it's an excellent, because we have $1 billion here, it's an excellent PSA. However, if it is felt and the country feels that a revision should be done, we will support that. I don't know where you're getting that from, and if you can, and that was in my budget speech as the shadow minister in the parliament in September of 2020. So I don't know where you are going.
If I may just add to David's points, we had indicated all along that we are going to hold the Jagdeo Irfan Ali administration to their promise that indeed a renegotiation must be done. They had said that this 2% and all of that were a rotten deal and that they will make sure that that contract is renegotiated. And what I'm telling you here now, Darwin, is that they fooled everybody, including probably yourself, when they now get into government and they cannot and will not renegotiate. The circumstances have been changed largely because of the fact that there is no pressure now from Venezuela to take away all our maritime sector out there, an economic zone. They cannot risk doing that now, that because of the fact that a big American company, ExxonMobil, is there. And the changed circumstances is just like in America, where the Biden administration has said, and it generally accepts its tax, and you just don't raise the tax and so on, in view of the massive profits that they're now making, that we are entitled to some more because the thing has gone from 400 million to $11 billion reserve in Stabroek alone. And if that is not good enough, notwithstanding the principle of sanctity of contract, it is never exclusively that whole principle. We could renegotiate and ensure that a larger piece of the pie comes for Guyanese. But what we see the government doing is not only not wanting to renegotiate, but is it like sealing the deal forever now in stone that Exxon cannot. So even in their new model, as against the 2012 model, they have now said that everybody else will have to abide by the new model, excepting Exxon. That's a shame and a disgrace on the PPP's government, and especially Jagdeo. It will disincentivize, as I said, other people who might want to come into the industry and just give, and you might find that they may start selling off other areas that oil is found because of the large capacity of Exxon to Exxon. And it might end up getting the whole bloody place. And that is not competitive.
So,
Kathy, I just wanted to,
Yes,
sorry,
go ahead,
Darwin.
David.
I just wanted to also remind Darwin, and I think that something keeps missing everyone. The 2016 PSA contract was modeled after. In 2012, Robert Prasad, being the Minister of Natural Resources, and the former President Donald Ramatar produced a draft 2012 PSA. And it seems to like skip people that this PSA was done by whoever experts they had and GGMC, and it was publicly available, I assume, from 2012 to 2016.
That's right.
And everyone had the opportunity to comment on it. No one did. 2016 comes around, Mr. Raphael Trotman takes up, he didn't write a new one, he takes up the 2012 PSA and says, here, let me improve on it. Let me increase the royalties, put this in, put in that, get a signing bonus. The basis of it, the basis of that thing, almost word for word, is the 2012 PSA that was around. Yet, I mean, so obviously no one says that the 2012 to 20, and it was around 2012, 2016. No one gets up and says that was defective. But Robert Prasad, with all his experts, and Donald Ramatar, with all the experts, and they come around. Jagdeo was around as well. Said nothing, but obviously now the impression is given that we sat and wrote a PSA that was defective.
So
it is the 2012 PSA that was used, that's being used.
Let me add to that, David. We go further back than 2012, okay? The first official contract was signed in 1999 by Janet Jagan. There wasn't a whole lot of change between the only big change between the 1999 contract and the 2016 contract was the 1% increase to 2%. So everybody keeps forgetting that there was a 1999 contract, which is almost exactly the only difference between the 1999 that was signed by Janet Jagan and the one that was signed by Raphael Trotman in 2016 was that the terms were expanded and there were more explanation as to what the terms mean. But it was almost identical except for the royalty. Now let me again the question about sanctity, and I guess the reporter asked about what changed. I would like to ask what changed in Mr. Jagdio's mind and the president's mind when before the election they were saying that this here is a sellout of the patrimony. There's no question that they will renegotiate. So I would like for you to ask, Mr. Wills, I would like for you to ask them what changed. Let's talk about sanctity. Here's what the sanctity of the contract says. In section, I think it's clause 42 something, it says it left an allowance for changes in that contract. And every contract internationally, it's an international norm that when you have substantial change, it's called a change conditions. That is the official language in contract. Anytime you have change conditions, you can change a contract. So this whole thing about sanctity, and that is why clause 42 point something, I can't remember exactly, it left that provision in there for a change condition, and it says both parties have to agree to that change. The problem is the government has never even approached Exxon to change it, and now they're making sure that they're protected against that. They never approached Exxon to change it, even though before the election they were saying, hey, there's no question, we're going to change it because this here is a sellout of our patrimony. So I would, if you don't mind, Mr. Wills, I would ask Mr. Jagdio and His Excellency what has changed in their minds as to why they're now using this word sanctity and they weren't using it before.
Thank you very much. I see Davina has her hand up. Davina, do you have your final question?
Oh, I actually have a follow-up.
Oh, Darwin, go ahead, Darwin.
Well, it's not necessarily a follow-up, but it's on another question because I hadn't finished, Mrs. Hughes. If you want to go to Davina, then feel free.
No. I'll take your response and then I will go to Davina and then we shall wrap up only because I know Kemraj has a commitment.
Yes, I am.
A little in a few minutes. Okay, Darwin, your next question, please.
Thanks so much. Not a response. So last week, the last press conference, I raised the point about local government election. And I mean, the clock, I said that the clock was ticking. We now have dates that are set for nomination as well as submission of lists and so on. Has the AFC reached a position on contesting the election? We are now in November and submissions have to happen, at least of your symbol has to happen mid-month.
Darwin, our position has not changed. The clock is, I think, mainly ticking for you right now. When the time comes, we will make the announcement. Okay? Thank you. Do you have anything else that you wanted to raise?
I do actually. At Mr. Norton's recent press conference, continuing the point that has been made previously about the voters list. The question was posed to him about accepting the elections results in 2015 on the very list. He said that the list had problems. And then he said that after 2019, there was an intention to fix the problem in that list. Doesn't like the list had problems cause the legitimacy of that 2015 election into question?
I'm sorry that we kind of lost you a bit. I don't know if my
at what point? Go ahead.
What is your final question?
Right. So let me go over again. From Mr. Norton's press conference.
Just the question.
Yeah. From Mr. Norton's press conference.
Right.
The question was regarding the list of electors, because the concern is raised about the list. And he's saying that the list had problems
Right.
and
What's your
that
final
there
question?
was an effort to fix those problems after 2019. But it seems to call the results of the 2015 election into question. So that is what I'm trying to play around with in my mind. Does that question the legitimacy of the 2015 election? This idea that the list that was used for that election had problems?
Well, let me ask you if it would then question the legitimacy of 2020 then. I'd like to ask David Patterson. David, if you make a quick comment, and then we do have
quick comment. You know, I mean, these historical things we're picking up. Darwin, in October of 2015, the party that is now in power issued a list of, I think, 10 demands. Number one was the removal of the GCOM's chairman. Number two of their 10 demands was a clean and credible voters election, a voters list. Number two, the first one they wanted to do is move Steve Shrewsbury into his credit. When the opposition said so, he said I was on tenure for me to continue if half of the electorate doesn't support my tenure, and he demitted office to his credit. The second demand was a clean and credible list. So I can answer your question rhetorically and ask, why did the PPP want a new list in 2016 and don't want a new list in 2015?
Thank you very much, David. Davina, the last question we pose to you, please.
Madam Chair, could I add it quickly there?
Yes, certainly.
All
Chair.
international observers too.
That's where I was coming with, because all of the international observers made that observation that we need a clean voters list.
That's
number
right.
one. And then the other thing to lead on David's point that he was making, the PPP did have an elections petition that they did not pursue with any vigor. So clearly they thought that the elections were brought into question, but we're not going to go on that. And so again, all of the international observers made the same point. So it's not just the APNU AFC or the AFC in particular, but we have all these other voices, and the PPP relied heavily on the international observation teams in the last election. So we can go on that.
Thank you very much.
Can I just ask who replaces Mr. Trotman in the National Assembly?
Beverly Alert.
Oh, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Davina, did you have a question or your hand is stuck up?
I have a quick question.
Okay, last one. Go ahead.
All right, thank you. So a new UN report has warned against gas to energy type projects. Yet Ghana is preparing to spend US $2 billion in a bid to reduce the cost of electricity. My question to the party is, why do you think government has turned its face on renewable options when this is the direction other countries around the world is heading?
I want to ask David Patterson to handle that question.
Thank you very much, Davina. And it's a nice question to end the press conference on. I'll try to be as short as succinct as possible. And the very short answer is the government have no clue about renewable energy. They have, in 2015, the only renewable project that they knew about was Amila Falls, which, as you know, is a Ponzi scheme. They're currently now just continuing all the plans that we put in place, all the groundwork that we laid. However, those are open and transparent projects. Those are things that persons could see. The gas to shore project, as you well know, Davina, and I think the rest of the country know, and even the PPP supporters silently acknowledge, it's a Ponzi scheme. It's there to enrich the friends and family of the governing party. You know, I mean, it's not well thought out. So the reason they're pursuing it has nothing to do with transitioning over to renewable energies, with all to do with corruption and money. It's a harebrained scheme, and I can tell you why it's a harebrained scheme. They have announced that the gas ashore will be operational, say 2024, but we know it wouldn't be ready by then. They have no plan between 2022 and 2024, in so much so that they're now going out to rent generators. How can, if you had no plan, if you had a plan to smoothly transition as the coalition did have, I mean, every year you're supposed to be investing and to keep track of our development. They have none, but they're at the end of 2022, 2024, they're going to spend $2 billion. And then they suddenly woke up and realized that we're having power outages. And they said, oh my, what are we going to do? They're renting now 50 megawatts. And in that 50 megawatts will cost the Guyanese public about $250 million in rental fees or more and infrastructure work, so almost $300 million between 2022 and whenever the gas to shore project comes on. And of course, that has to be added on to the gas to shore project, because if you had a plan, what normally any prudent government would have been doing, just like we did in 2019, you buy generators comes in 20 megawatt sets. You purchase 2 or 3 every year to keep a pace with your development, and whenever the gas comes on to show you move, you transition them over. So in short, it's just a Ponzi scheme. Everyone knows it's a Ponzi scheme. The UN and everyone is saying, oh, you should go transition immediately to renewable energy. We have abundance. We have 66 potential hydro sites in Guyana. We have great solar intensity. We have great wind energy. Yet they're only concentrating on the one project, the most opaque of the options that they have. And that's obviously, we know we've dropped consistently on the corruption perception and index, and that project alone, I'm sure, is going to drop us a further 2 more points. That one alone, added to the other corruption, 2 more points in the 2022 CPI index. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Members of the media, our presenters today, our technical persons, we want to thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Please have a safe and happy weekend, and we will see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, folks.